back to Sailor's Disgrace. This episode, I'd like to start off as usual with a quote. This one is another quote by Sylvia Plath, and it was God, it was good to let go, let the tight mask fall off, and the bewildered, chaotic fragments pour out. It was the purge, the catharsis. And I just underwent a huge catharsis with my trauma, with my life in the Coast Guard, with my issues with the chain of command, with everything that's happened with the fouled anchor report and the ATR. There's a lot to unpack here, and I want to start off by saying that I'm grateful to be where I am now. I'm grateful to have this opportunity to make this podcast. I'm grateful to have the opportunity where I'm going to talk about here in a minute, where I actually went to Coast Guard headquarters and spoke regarding this entire topic. And I have a lot of insight and a lot of hope for the future, I believe. And there's a lot of good people on our side. So I'll start it off by saying that I solicited my input when the ATR kicked off against Accountability Transparency Review after the fouled anchor report was released by CNN. Admiral Fagan kind of spearheaded this whole initiative and said, hey, we got to get on top of this. What can we do? And the first thing they did was open it up to the fleet. They asked for feedback. They asked for anybody to say what they felt, what they've seen. And I was very explicit in what I went through. And I said, please contact me. And they did. They reached out to me, and we've been working together. I've been working with the headquarters sapper component. And I must say that they are really, really dedicated and really wanting to do the right thing. So that's been very heartening. And they invited me to speak at this senior executive summit. So if you guys remember from my episode, a couple episodes back, where I talk about the ATR report, there were different milestones. And this is one of the first milestones. And I'm going to read it verbatim. This is from the Workforce Training Culture and Professional Development. Provide tailored training to help personnel, from the newest recruits to senior executives, better act upon the service's core values, understand organizational expectations, and cultivate a positive workplace climate. Item 1. Senior Executive ATR Implementation Summit. Convene a Senior Executive ATR Implementation Summit to review critical actions and hold in-person bystander intervention training. The purpose of this summit is to ensure senior executive visibility of all ATR action items, affirm the role in implementation, deliver Commandant expectations of the service, and facilitate the ability of senior executives to personally champion bystander intervention training. That was due in February of 2024, and they did it. We did it about 2 weeks ago. So I was invited to speak as a survivor. This was a 2-day summit. I did not attend the first day. I only came for the second day, which I feel was enough for me personally. Although I understand there was a lot of good discussion the first day, but I can only speak to what I saw. I'd also like to give a quick shout out to the folks at RAIN, which is the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network. They worked closely with me in particular, and we spoke via Zoom at first to kind of get a feel of how I was doing, if I was comfortable saying what I was going to say. And they were great. They were a great resource, and they were actually there in the room with me. And I was really blessed to have them in my corner. So I just want to give them a shout out if they're listening. You guys are awesome. And I hope to continue working with you guys. So yeah, I was there for the second day of this summit, and a lot of things happened prior to me getting to this. I was really focusing. I was meditating a lot. I was making sure I was comfortable with this, and I really was. And I actually prepared some statements. I wrote out a little bit of a timeline of what I wanted to discuss, but I didn't really feel genuine, So I don't want to jump ahead of myself here, but I didn't really feel like a written statement would have been more robotic, And I'm sure I would have written something great, but it didn't sit well with me. I knew that I had to speak from the heart. I had key points that I really wanted to hit, and I actually spoke with Melissa McCafferty, who was on the Congressional hearing she talked about her assault, and she's really, really adamant about all this and really proactive and pushing forward with a lot of good stuff. So I spoke with her on the phone the night before I went to the summit, and she was also extremely supportive. So a quick shout out to her. So thanks, Melissa. Um, so anyway, so I was ready, and I really wanted to speak from the heart. So that was my decision moving forward. I kind of put the paperwork aside. I put my Word document away. I was like, what, I know what the key things I want to say are, and I'm just gonna talk from the heart. I'm gonna feel the room out, see what it's like, see who's there. I knew that most of the admirals or some admirals would be there. I wasn't sure exactly who. Um, Turns out it's pretty much every admiral in the Coast Guard, active and reserve, as well as most of the gold badge master chiefs, for the land areas, pack areas, districts, some of the bigger sectors I noticed were in there as well, and then civilian SESs, so like your senior civilian counterparts. So it was a packed room, it was over 100 people, somewhere between 100 and 140, and I wasn't intimidated at all. I felt really comfortable talking to these people, and I think that's just because of where I am in my career and what I've been through. I'm not afraid of people. I'm not afraid of position. 15 years ago, there's no way I could have done this, but now it's like I'm just talking to a group of coasties and I can say what I want. And I was given free reign to say whatever I want, so I went there. Um, and another amazing thing that was, I don't think it's coincidence, I think it was meant to be. Um, the morning of my training, I saw the schedule, and bystander intervention training, as I mentioned, was part of this summit. And guess who the presenter was? It was Shannon Nordenberg. And for those of you that have been listening to the podcast, uh, season one, I did an interview with her, but she's the person that I came out to with my story back in 2016. And we sat in the back of the room together. We talked, we hugged, we reconnected, and at first Shannon wasn't sure if she was going to stay for my portion because she had to drive back to New London, to Connecticut. Um, but once she realized what I was going to do, she's like, I'm going to stay late. I'm going to watch you. I really need to be here for this. So thank you, Shannon. Your strength and presence in the room helped me do what I had to do. So it was amazing. The universe was telling us something, that we were doing the right thing, and I felt great about that. Um, so everything was very surreal going up until this point. I flew from Santa Barbara all the way out to Washington, D.C., got in a hotel, and I had family plans around this as well. I don't want to discuss family plans, but I met some family the night after, and went up to New York to do some family business and see some great friends. And so I had all this stuff going on in my head, and everything just felt like I was being put there for a reason. Like I really had to deliver, and not to psych myself up or worry about stumbling on my words or anything like that. I just felt like this is good. This is finally good. Um, so I really didn't have any fear or shame telling my story, and I went into great detail. Um, and I painted a picture of all my family history. I talked about my father being in the Coast Guard, how I was raised in the Coast Guard, how my older brother's in the Coast Guard, and I was just meant to do this, and how I've always had a passion for helping people, and that's why I chose the Coast Guard over the Marines. And I really felt like I laid out why I wanted to join the Coast Guard. And then I talked about the culture of the Coast Guard. I talked about my first day on the boat, and if you go back to, I think it's episode 1 or 2 of my season 1, I talk about that event, in detail, and how that really set the tone. Just that first hour on the boat set the tone for my entire career. And I have hundreds of examples very similar to that, or even worse than that, that I didn't get into during the summit. But I laid that out, and I really said, like, this is what happens, and this is the culture that we're in, and it's still there. Maybe less than it used to be, but it's still there. We have a very toxic culture in the Coast Guard, and I used to laugh about it. I used to be part of it too sometimes, but I realize now that it breeds other things. It leads to other things. It opens the door for abuse, and it opens the door for assault. It opens the door for mismanagement. It opens the door for so many negative things that it shouldn't be allowed. And I really honed on that, and like the Master Chief, I guess, of the Coast Guard was there. Commandant was front and center. I was looking at her most of this time. And I went, I talked about how I got in trouble and then how that put a target on my back. And then I talked about the rape itself. And that was very, very graphic. And I warned them beforehand that I was going to be graphic because I really needed to let them know just how awful this event was. And I talked about how I flushed it away, the right afterwards, and I didn't deal with it for 12 years, and how I had hemorrhoids, and I had the hemorrhoidectomy, and they found the warts, and I talked about my, alcohol abuse throughout that time, and then I talked about 2016 when I met Shannon and having my breakdown and going through the CJIS investigation. And for those of you that haven't listened to the first season, please do. I'm not going to rehash everything here, but I went into all the problems there. And I went into the medical, how Coast Guard medical was no help whatsoever. How my command in Houston was zero help. And actually, that got a reaction from a lot of the admirals in the room. I could hear an audible "fuck," when I told them about what my deputy said to me, and when I came to him with my problems. And I said I had to do all this stuff alone. I was really alone. I really had to champion my own care. I really had to advocate for myself, and it was indicative of the culture. Even still, I had no one to really turn to, and that whole culture was really the focus of what I was talking about. A quick sidebar too. It's a small Coast Guard. There were actually two shipmates of mine from the chase that were in the room. One was, they were both non-rates at the time and are both Master Chiefs now. And then Admiral Sugimoto, who's the District 11 Admiral, he was there. And he actually joined the chase right after I left. And I heard nothing but great things about him. I think he was the EO, so he was like a commander at the time. And I heard nothing but great things about this guy and how he really helped clean a lot of those problems up. And so it was good to talk to him too. And he expressed his frustrations with the chase. He was like, yeah, when I got there was actual gangs on board. I'm like, yeah, I know. I remember, and so he was very aware. But anyway, I really laid it all out, and I talked about how my cancer came about because of that, how stress and PTSD affect the body, how our bodies keep the score. And it was just really heartfelt, and I'm not even sure how long I spoke. I think maybe close to 30 minutes, but I really didn't pay attention to the time. I think I was allotted 30 minutes, but I just spoke from the heart, and nobody stopped me, of course. And the way I ended my time up there is I painted that picture of this toxic culture in the Coast Guard and how this was bred at the academy. And I said, I finished my podcast, early of 2023, and I had my story out there. I removed all the shame and guilt. I felt great about it, but I didn't know where to go next. I wanted to talk about the underlying issues with the Coast Guard. And then by some miracle, a few months after I finished season 1 of my podcast, Fouled Anchor came out on CNN. And the words I used were, I was sad to read the Fouled Anchor report, but nothing in that report surprised me. I was also saddened to understand that the report was buried by the previous commandant and senior officers. I was saddened to read that and to understand that, but I was not surprised. And I connected it all. I said, this is why people don't trust the people in this room. This is why the fleet does not trust their commands. This is why people don't come forward. This is why we don't feel safe. That's why it took me so long, 12 years to even come out with a story just in a small circle, and 20 years almost to get to where I am today. Because I didn't trust the system. I still don't have trust in the system. And I talked about how people don't trust the system, how Coast Guard medical railroad people, and how commands throw people out, and really just you're fed to the wolves a lot of the time. So people see that something happened to someone else. It only takes one, and that's it. There's no faith in the system. There's no trust, and that's what needs to be rebuilt. And it's going to take time, and it's going to be painful. And I kind of hinted at recalling some people, maybe the former commandant, heads of the academy, and holding them accountable. Because right now that's what's missing from the ATR, the accountability piece, the A. There's no accountability. All we're seeing is redacted names and people losing positions after the Coast Guard and stuff like that, but nobody's really being held to the mat. So the thing I left them with is what I usually say at, I say it a lot, and I've said it at different departing speeches, when I leave a unit, or even just to my guys when I'm talking to them. It's, I feel the purpose of us in life in general, but even especially within the Coast Guard, whatever job you're in, is to leave it better than you found it. Do positive change. Make those, whether it's simple as streamlining a process or overhauling it, whatever it might be. But in this case, I was talking about the culture in the Coast Guard. I was talking about this toxic, repressive culture, and the people in the room are responsible for it. These are all academy folks. Most of them are from the academy. All these admirals, and they grew up in this. They grew up in this system. They were taught to sweep stuff under the rug. They were taught to not speak up. They were taught to hide things because it looks bad on the Coast Guard. And I said, I charge each and every single one of you in this room to leave it better than you found it. And that was it. I ended, and I got a standing ovation. And Admiral Thomas, who's in charge of medical for the Coast Guard, she's actually really cool. She gave me a big hug, and Shannon, of course, hugged me, and it was really emotional, and it felt cathartic. That's why I named this episode. It was cathartic. I felt so relieved, and I felt so grateful to tell the people that need to hear this exactly how I felt. And I'm hopeful, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more, but there were some very heartfelt people that came up to me after that. We had a lunch break after that, and a lot of them gave me hugs, the admirals I've never met before, and then my former shipmates that I talked about gave me hugs and said, we're changed, and oh my God, so sorry, of course, but, the way we view things now is going to be completely different. The way we approach these issues is going to be completely different. I heard that from a lot of people, and it was very genuine from those particular people. On the flip side of that, there were some very disingenuous people. I could tell. You can tell when people are just politicking and when they're just, oh, I'm so sorry this happened to you, Mr. Bell, and we're going to do everything we can to make this right. Okay, you're blowing smoke. You're still covering for yourself. There were quite a few people like that. I'm not going to name names on here, but we're going to see what shakes out. So one of the things that the Commandant spoke in that room was about ongoing investigations, not details. And actually, I spoke with her one-on-one. I went to the break room after lunch, and I grabbed a cupcake. And as I was coming back into the conference room, she cornered me, and I'm holding this cupcake with a little Coast Guard flag inside of it. I'm like, ah, shit. She talked to me for about 5 or 10 minutes. It was good. So I had one-on-one with her, and she's doing what she can, I think. She was handed a giant shit sandwich, essentially, and I'm not sure how complicit she is in this. There's talk that she knew some of this before. I know there were non-disclosure agreements signed prior to Foul Anchor being covered up, so she was a 2 or 3 star at the time, so she may have had some knowledge of this. But I think she really is trying to move forward with all of this. And then I talked about accountability, and she's like, yeah, there's 4 internal investigation congressionals, and there's OIG, Office of Inspector General. There are investigations currently happening, and I heard OPM, which is the Office of Personnel Management, speaking in the room, the 2 star, talking about recalling people and holding them accountable. So I think we're going to see how this pans out, how these investigations pan out from Congress, and then our internal investigations from DHS and so forth. But I'm hopeful that some people are going to be called to the mat, and we'll see what accountability looks like. We'll see what they say, what kind of apologies, whatever it is, we'll see. We will see. But overall, I'm hopeful. Like I said, I really felt, and I was given a lot of praise, not just for telling my story, but for laying out that culture. And I heard many times, I sat around the rest of the afternoon and McPog was talking. I spoke with him one on one too, but they were talking up on the stage, that they've all sat through different kinds of executive summits. They have these for different reasons and different policy changes and whatever it might be, but they said this one's completely different. This one is truly impacting the way they think and the way they feel moving forward. And I feel like I had a part in that, and if it takes all of this trauma and all this terrible stuff I had to go through to fix the Coast Guard, I'm not going to say necessarily it was worth it. Of course, I wish I wasn't raped. Of course, that if I could have had a normal career, or felt, that I was protected and safe from day one, that would have been awesome. But that's not what happened. I realized that what I went through was terrible. It was absolutely shameful, and I'm lucky to be alive. I talked about that too, about the mental issues I had, the breakdown, the suicidal thoughts, ideations, and near attempts. I talked about that in very candid, detailed language, and all that led me to that room. It led me to talk, and I'm going to talk some more too. I'm actually going up to Alameda in a couple weeks where they're going to record my story. So the folks from the Sapper headquarters program are going to come out and meet me and someone else, and they're going to record us telling our stories and doing like a Q&A, and I'm not sure exactly how it's going to pan out, but they're going to use that for training purposes in the Coast Guard. And, so all this is coming together, and I'm honored to be in this position, as strange as that may sound. I really am. I feel humbled, and I'm not afraid anymore. I'm not afraid to speak my mind. I'm not afraid to tell people that I don't want to be around them. I'm not afraid to say that this is not working, and this is, these things are messed up, and this is how we fix them. Like, I am fully locked in with that. Not just obviously with the sexual assault stuff, but just me in my personal life. I've really come around, and maybe a part of that's just maturing in general, but I really feel like I'm taking ownership of myself, and I really don't have fear with that stuff anymore. A little nervous sometimes, of course, but no fear, and no shame. And I try to teach that to my kids, and I try to really preach that with them. And they're young, middle school almost, but they're getting it. And I love hearing the younger generation talk like this. They teach mindfulness in their schools. They talk about these things, so it's awesome. I'm getting a little sidetracked, but again, I am hopeful. But more reports keep coming out, and there's a recent CNN article. I think I already posted it, but I'll put the link to it on this episode as well. But some of the frustrations from the congressional hearings and the investigation, they say the Coast Guard is not giving them all the documents they need, and they're redacting a lot of names that they need, not being completely transparent as they say they are. Go figure. But something that they pulled out, and this was something that Admiral Ray, I believe, hand wrote when they were deciding whether or not to release the foul anchor report. They put basically, Admiral Ray in particular decided not to release the foul anchor report for not recommended. Among the concerns listed were intense scrutiny of all past to present Coast Guard Academy leadership, a potential demand for all sexual assault cases to be reviewed, and extensive media coverage and investigative journalism, and suggested malfeasance. Yeah, that's what I've been saying this whole time, even before foul anchor came out, that the Coast Guard has been more interested in saving face and recruiting numbers and our bottom line than their people, the current people in the Coast Guard. That's where all of this falls apart. That's where everything disintegrates. This self-serving, this worried about my promotion, worried about my career, worried about how this looks to Congress. We may not get the funding that we need. Meanwhile, people are being assaulted, abused, mistreated, mishandled, and serious issues are swept under the rug on a routine basis because it is taught at the academy and put forth through the service. And this went all the way up until they buried this, I believe, in just a few years ago, 2019, 2020. They buried this on purpose for suggested malfeasance. Well, good job, and maybe heads will roll. We're going to see what's going to happen. So that's it. I'm going to follow up. I'm going to keep reading the news. I'll probably do another episode pretty soon. Like I said, in a few weeks, I'll be in Alameda to record my story for the Coast Guard. I'm excited. I'm really excited, and I'm grateful to have the opportunity. I'm grateful to have a family that supports me, a wonderful wife that loves and supports me. It's good. Life is good, and that's it. I appreciate everyone for listening. Please drop comments. Tell me what you think about this. All this in general, not just the summit that I went to, but how everything's shaping out. It's amazing where life takes us, and I'm really honored to be where I am. So, as always, I'd like to thank David Brown with Wayward Blues for supplying the theme music. It's always spot on. It really just paints the picture and ties it all together, man. So thank you so much. And for all of you listeners out there, take care of yourselves.